It is 9 o'clock, so thank you for participating in SDAC Zoom meeting. My name is Bobby Dutta, and I'm the co-chair of SDAC. Please know that this event is being recorded for later broadcast on YouTube. Now, I just wanted to go over some basic housekeeping rules. To avoid an echo, please be sure to mute speakers and microphone on one device if using multiple devices. If you do not hear the echo, you are likely the one that's causing the echo, so please unmute or mute speakers, microphone, and make sure the echo goes away. Again, if you have a question to ask, you can do so by posting it on chat or raising your hand and unmute yourself when you're asked to do so. If not speaking or asking a question, please keep your microphone muted at all times. Again, to avoid reverb, please be sure to speak closely and quietly into the microphone. Thank you. And again, please note that this event is being recorded on YouTube for later broadcasting. Our first guest is Dr. Tomas Aragon. Dr. Aragon serves as the Director of California Department of Public Health and the State Public Health Officer since January 4th, 2021. Prior to coming to CDPH, he was the health officer for the City and County of San Francisco and Director of the Public Health Division. Dr. Aragon had served in public health leadership roles for more than 20 years. In different capacities, ranging from communicable disease controller, deputy health officer, so on, too numerous to mention, including directing a public health emergency preparedness and response research and training center at the University of California, Berkeley School of Public Health. As CDPH director, Dr. Aragon, striving to embody and promote the universal values of dignity, equity, compassion, and humility. He works through collaborative partnership to mobilize communities and institutions to transform policies and system towards a culture of equity, anti-racism, healing, and health for all people and our planet. As a state public health officer, he exercises leadership and legal authority to protect health and prevent disease. Dr. Aragon graduated from University of California, Berkeley, BA in molecular biology, epidemiology, Harvard Medical School, Harvard School of Public Health, and Stanford University certification, strategic decision, and risk management. He is a man of many talent. He completed his clinical and research training at the University of California, San Francisco General Hospital, primary care, internal medicine, clinical infectious disease, traineeship in AIDS prevention studies. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Aragon from CDPH. Dr. Aragon, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Bobby. So I want to start by just thanking everybody for everything that you do. Your work is very important, and we're at a special time right now because we've gone through a really stressful last few years that has impacted all of us, and has impacted our communities, and I'm sure it's impacted you more than other folks. So thank you for contributing to everything you do, serving the state and the communities across California. I really appreciate it. So I received a few questions, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about CDPH, and then I'm going to try to answer those questions, hopefully in a way that's going to give you some ideas of things that you can implement in your work that will be helpful to you, that will be helpful to your health, and you'll understand the culture we're trying to create here at CDPH. And I encourage you, if you like something, please spread it to your agency. That's my real motivation, is to try to get folks to do more of what I'm about to show you. Okay, so you should see my slides right now. I'm just getting that here. Okay. So to tell you a little bit about CDPH, I'm going to tell you what our goals are. And so it took me a little while to sort of really settle down into these three major areas. So the tagline that we use is the CDPH way, becoming the best at getting better. And that becoming the best at getting better is something that we adapted from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where they have being the best at getting better. And part of the reason why we adopted this was the idea that, you know, as public servants, our job is to serve the public. And just like every other professions, our job is to get better at what we do. That's our job. Our job is to get better at what we do. So the first area there is to become a learning, healing, and impactful organization. And those three words are very intentional. So the learning is that component of getting better. The healing is just as important also. As an organization, we are only as good as our staff are healthy. That means our staff need rest, they need time off, they need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, but also that we're taking care of them. That we're not creating an environment that's adding stresses that they're unable to manage. So the healing component is really important. I'm not going to talk about that today, but we do have a training program that's doing training on this very topic. It's called Trauma Responsive Leadership Training, and it's training individuals on how to be aware of the chronic stresses and trauma they experience, and how to mitigate that risk with themselves and with their staff and their programs. The nice thing about the trauma responsive training is that it immediately applies to all aspects of life. The third area there is impactful. At the end of the day, we want to make a difference. So I would hope that every agency in California has these three. The second one there is to develop our people. Of course, you can't do anything if you don't develop our people. So really investing in our staff's core competencies and also in their personal professional development, helping them fulfill their aspirations. And then the last one is tackling key public health challenges. So those are the three major areas. The theory of change is on the right-hand side, that diagram. I'm going to be talking mostly about philosophy and its impact on transforming self and interpersonal relationships. You cannot be successful in number 4 if you're not successful in number 3. And number 3 is not, you can't be successful unless you're successful in number 2 and of course number 1. So I spend a lot of time on 1, 2, and 3. And your teams are your laboratories to experiment, try new things, and to get better. Under the category of learning, we've adopted lean as our primary framework for continuous improvement. Lean is systematically developing people to solve problems and consuming the fewest possible resources while continuously improving processes to provide value to community members and prosperity to society. So lean, it tends to be very well known for focusing on efficiency as well as effectiveness. there are 6 components of lean that are really part of the CDPH lean operating system. The first 2 are the most important. So I tell people, if you can't remember anything else about lean, just remember the first 2. Number 1 is respect for people. Respect for yourself, respect for the staff, respect for your external partners, suppliers, for the community. So respect for people. And I'm going to be spending some time on that one. Of course, continuous improvement. Number 3 is scientific thinking, problem solving, and innovation. Number 4 is management by objectives and key results. I'm not going to have time to go over this, but I put some information there in the appendix. And one of the first few slides in the appendix on this topic has a great 4-minute video that you can watch to introduce you to this. OKRs is a leadership and goal-setting best practice that has been adopted by the state and Governor Newsom, and it's just awesome. It's awesome, and so you will it'll really help you in everything you do, whether it's personal goals or whether it's a professional goal. Number 5 is being agile, adaptive, and responsive to meet challenges and opportunities. And the last one is elimination of waste and undesired variability. And that is really, we should not do things that don't add value to our staff, our primary customer, and to our mission. So those are the 6 things. I'm showing this to you because, again, I believe that every agency, every organization should have these 6 elements as part of their improvement operating system. You cannot leave one off. They're all important. Okay, so I'm going to dive into the topic of respect for people. The lens I'm going to use for respect for people is the topic of extending and building trust. And the reason why I'm spending some time with this is that I've noticed this is a big problem right now that we have in public health and just in government in general. The public has lost trust in government. Our attempts to build trust, including building trust with the community, often doesn't go very smoothly because we don't really break it down and really understand what is trust. What is trust, to really, really try to understand it. And one of my hypotheses is that we're not going to be successful in building trust with our partner agencies, with our communities, unless we are able to build trust with our own staff. So the internal transformation is just as important as the external transformation. There has to be alignment, congruence, and all the internal work is what gives us the skills and ability to do it externally. So this is what I mentioned earlier, and that is the biggest determinant of successful COVID policies, the biggest determinant were, this was done across the country, research across the country and in the United States, interpersonal trust in the community and trust of government. Interpersonal trust in the community and trust of government. It's not, we could have the most scientific policies in the world, the most evidence-based policies, we can be the most prepared, but it won't be as successful as we think it's going to be if there's not trust. So that's why we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this. And it's going to connect to the questions that were given to me of what to cover. I'm going to give a summary. And then I'm going to go over this again in more detail. So have repetition. Both trust and trustworthiness are inherent in all relationships. So think of trust and trustworthiness as two sides of the same coin. And they always exist in every relationship. And we simultaneously play two different roles in every relationship. The first role we play is role of trustor. And so trust applies to the trustor. So let me read you this. Trust is a psychological state of the truster, and it is the willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another party. Trust is a choice. So it's a psychological state that's a choice to us, but it mostly happens intuitively from our gut. But sometimes it happens deliberatively. We kind of think, I don't know if I can trust that boss or that person or that unit. Okay. So they deliberate and they weigh and say, nope, I'm not gonna take my chances. So it's a psychological state. And the psychological state can be very powerful. It can be very draining, but it could also be very inspiring if you feel that if you have a lot of trust. Think of trust as think of trust as oil in a machine, that when you have plenty of oil, there's no friction and things just happen. The next component is trustworthiness. Trustworthiness are the attributes of the trustee. The key drivers of trustworthiness are character, caring, competence, and consistency. And those attributes drive our reasoning, thoughts, feelings, and actions that affect the trustor. So I want you to put your hat on right now. Think of yourself as a trustee for a moment. How do you build trust? To build trust, you need to be trustworthy. Think of those attributes I just listed. Use a human-centered approach to assess the needs of the trustor. Think of your staff or the community. And I'm going to go over these components. And then act in ways that inspires trust. Act in ways that inspires trust in the trustor. Caution. Being trustworthy is necessary, but not sufficient to build trust. You could be awesome. You could have the best character, the most caring person, the most competent, the most consistent person, but it doesn't mean that people will trust you. Okay. And so we're going to have to unpack that and look at that. To extend trust, to put yourself to be vulnerable, there's also some strategies, including assuming good intent as a default strategy, assessing your propensity to trust, your perception of risk to you, and your appraisal of a trustee's trustworthiness, or communicating clearly what you need to have trust and confidence. So both of these are important, and I'm going to cover those in more detail right now. So one way to just summarize everything I just said is through this diagram. Some people are visual learners. So remember I said is that part of your job, our job, is to be trustworthy. And it's driven by character, caring, competence, and consistency. But people cannot see that you're trustworthy. They only see behaviors. Those are the trees. Think of the tree leaves as behaviors. That's evidence of your trustworthiness. Okay, you do things that indicate that you have character, that you care, that you're competent, that you're consistent. Okay, and then the trustor, you see there over there on the right hand at the top, they're trying to decide, should I be willing to accept vulnerability with this person, this program, this boss, this supervisor? Well, their decision to trust is going to be driven by their propensity to trust at baseline. Are they just distrustful even before knowing anything? Maybe they've been burned in the past so many times in other jobs or by institutions in the past and they're just not going to trust anybody until it's earned. The perception of risk. Can I trust something? This came up with COVID a lot because COVID, the perception, COVID in general had low mortality rates. However, from a public health perspective, it was huge. But from a person in the community, they might say, oh, that number is not too bad. So perceptions of risk, and then appraisal of the evidence of the person who's giving you evidence of their trustworthiness. How are you appraising it? These are going to be filtered through whatever lens you have. So this is an important diagram. It's a visual way of remembering that these big ideas. So trust is the willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another party. That's the most important thing here. It is a psychological state, a willingness to be vulnerable. I mentioned that in an organization, we want to build a culture of trust. We want staff to feel safe, to risk vulnerability, to tackle the most challenging, sensitive topics in service of the organizational purpose. So our jobs, all of our jobs, is to be trustworthy, to behave in ways that inspire trust, and to design systems that promote a culture of trust. I want you not to confuse trust with confidence. They overlap. They do overlap. Oftentimes when people are getting training on how to build trust, they focus on the competence component. If you get super confident, deliver everything on time, under budget, and with high quality, you're going to build trust. You will build trust in that competency component of trust. But people may still not trust you. People may not feel safe, may not feel that they can be vulnerable, that they can open up to you. So don't confuse trust and confidence. There is an overlap. And I notice people confuse it all the time. And I notice trainings, especially in the business sectors, tend to have a lot of focus on that component of trust. So this is a really popular book. It's called The Thin Book of Trust. I highly recommend it. It's in its second edition. It is really thin. It's awesome. Everybody should read it, read a few pages each day. Lots of really concrete examples. You're going to see things in there say, oh, I can't believe that I did some of this stuff in here. I didn't realize that I could be burning trust with other folks in what I did. They have here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be combining their model and the next model into a more comprehensive model that is the diagram that I showed you. The first diagram that I showed you, the tree, that is the model that I'm promoting, and it integrates the key things from this book and one other book that I'm going to show you. You'll see here in terms of trustworthiness, the circles are trustworthiness, care, competence. Instead of sincerity, I am putting character. Character is a more holistic approach to that specific topic. And if you have good character, you will be sincere. Reliability, I changed to consistency. And the choice to trust, the triangles, I'm going to show you in a second. I'm going to repeat again what I showed you earlier. Stephen M.R. Covey, he wrote a book called The Speed of Trust, also a great book. He broke things down. There's the competence again, right? And he broke down things like this. And I really like the fact that he focused on character and the metaphor of having a tree, of the roots, because the strength of the tree depends on the roots more than anything else. But you can't see the roots, right? You don't know. A wind comes and it just knocks down the tree. So think of that as something that happens and the person stops being trustworthy when the going gets tough. That means that they don't have deep roots. But if they have courage and they stick with it and the roots are deep, they have strong character, the wind's not going to blow them over. So this is the same model as the tree. You see there the 4 components of trustworthiness and the components of trust, the willingness to accept vulnerability, the propensity to trust, the perception of risk, and the appraisal of evidence of the person who's the trustee. So remember, these are inherent in every relationship, and we play both these roles simultaneously in every relationship. I'm breaking them down for you so you can think about it. When you're trying to build trust, you're focusing on the green circles. When you're trying to extend trust, you're focusing on when I say extend trust, when you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable, you're focusing on the triangle. Okay? This is just a more complicated way of that. And this is the diagram that I showed you. So whichever model speaks to you, go ahead and use that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into each one of those and give you some tips. We're not going to have time to go over these in detail, but I do want to give you some tips. Building character, incredibly, incredibly important. And here are the things that I find useful. And as you read books, you'll see a lot of these in other books. One is universal values. So universal values are values that apply to everybody on earth, leaving no one behind, including your adversaries. This came from Dr. Monica Sharma, who was the director of leadership development at the United Nations for over 20 years. She did public health projects all over the world, and she found that through universal values, it enabled people who did not agree with each other, who had very different values, to transcend their differences, to find common purpose, a common goal, and to work on achieving those goals, even though they may have disagreed on everything else. And the reason that was possible was because they focused on, as their foundation, universal values. The ones that she found most useful were dignity, equity, and compassion as being the most useful, that you would extend that to everybody, no matter who that person is, even if it's somebody who you can't stand and they can't stand you. That you do that because you want to transcend the differences, come together, find common ground, and solve problems together. Sometimes people will use the word fairness instead of equity, and that's okay. So that's universal values. The more you think about universal values, the more you stand on them. Hang on 1 second, sorry, my phone's ringing. Hang on, sorry. I'm gonna have to check out just for a minute. Hang on 1 second, Mark. Okay, I'm back.
Welcome back.
That was my boss, Secretary Mark Alley.
Oh, okay.
Called me. So that's part of being responsive.
And building trust, Dr.
Yeah.
Aragon, right?
Yes, you have to be. That's part of the being that's actually part of the consistency. We haven't got to that one yet. Okay, so let me just where was I? I mentioned I mentioned universal values. So that's universal. That's universal values. The more you stand in, promote, reflect, it transforms your conversations, how you interact every day in every meeting, all the time. It's really useful, and I have found it very, very calming. By when I was in local public health, I would be in community meetings sometimes with people who did not trust government and would be upset with me because to them I represented government, and they would let me know that they were unhappy, and I always made sure to always really extend the universal values to everybody. So to always treat them with respect, no matter how they treated me, to always treat them with respect, to give them dignity. They deserve compassion, fairness, and dignity just like anybody else. So it does change how one carries themselves and how they walk through the world. So the next one is humility, the topic of humility. This is a very deep topic. I'm just going to just give you a definition of general humility. General humility is the noble choice to forego your status and to use your influence for the good of others before yourself. The noble choice to forego your status and to use your influence for the good of others before yourself. So that's general humility. When you have more power, and you may have power for a variety of reasons, but in an organization, or people who are promoted to other higher levels in an organization end up having more power. So the thing is that the more humble you are, the more you can transform that power for the good of others before yourself. And that's servant leadership. And so the concept of humility gets amplified and stronger as somebody has more influence. The next one here is, and you'll see there's a definition there of cultural humility, which gets in, which we're not gonna have time to go through, but take a look at that. Moral compass and ethical behavior. Again, this is about character. We see a lot of issues right now in politics around moral compass and ethical behavior, where we're seeing that many elected officials are demonstrating that they don't have deep roots. They don't have deep roots. Their leaves, their trees are being driven by other things. Of course, honesty and authenticity. Integrity means alignment, that there's alignment with the way you think, you feel, and you act and what you say. Courage is risking vulnerability for a greater good. And there are little acts of courage all the time. So when somebody speaks up and it's hard for them to speak up, that's an act of courage. Sometimes people don't recognize that. Being loyal when people are not in the room, that you're not speaking about them. Accountability is about owning your influence. So you need to be accountable for the things that you can influence. And that, of course, includes the things that you're responsible for. Sometimes people will see something and they'll say, I'm not responsible for that. But you had influence over it. So you have some accountability. So accountability is really, it should be really called self-accountability. It's almost impossible to hold other people accountable unless you have a concrete mechanism. People use that term all the time. Hold that person accountable. Well, there's very few things that you can do unless they're coercive. So we can hold elected officials accountable by not voting for them next time. You can fire somebody if you have the evidence to be able to do that. So accountability is, if you focus on coercive methods, your playbook is going to be super, super, super thin. So you want to focus on how do we develop a culture of self-accountability to make it easy for people to hold themselves accountable. And that's part of what Lean does. Lean has techniques like visual management, things to make it easy for people to hold themselves accountable, giving them the training, making sure they don't have too much on their plate, etc. And of course, transparency. Transparency, you see at the very bottom there, always communicating your intent, your motive, your agenda, and expectations. Most people don't do that. Most people will just say, okay, here's what's happening. That's going to be the agenda, but they don't say the motive or the intent, the what and the why. People just jump to the who, the how, the who, where, and when. And when you do that, people feel like you're not being transparent. What's their intent? What's their motive? So it's really important for us to be really intentional and to when we're trying to build transparency, that we hit those things. So these things require some reflection and practice and thinking. Okay, I'm gonna briefly go through a couple more because I don't want to burn through all our time. So that was character. In my mind, character is the most important because it is the roots of the tree. Okay. Most trainings that you go to will tell you that caring is most important. Caring, yes, caring is most important. Not most important. I would call it second most important, but some people say, no, that's the most important because other people want to feel that you care about them. Absolutely agree. But if you make people feel like you care about them, but it's very superficial, it's not authentic, you're not genuine, that means your roots are very shallow, and that's not sufficient. Yes, you may come across as trustworthy, you may build trust, but it's not with a strong foundation. So the roots are the foundation. Okay, so of course, be humble. Be humble, ensure fairness and dignity, promote inclusion and belonging. It's not enough just to include people. People have to feel like they belong. Ensure psychological and physical safety, and then be trauma transformed, responsive, and preventive. The competency one is sort of speaks to itself. Just whatever you do, remember, our continuous improvement is the work. Our job is, whatever our job is to get better. That means that we have to have humility. We have to be willing to learn, try new things, get feedback. Some of this is hard. Getting feedback is hard because sometimes feedback stings. And so you have to develop those deep roots, that character. Part of developing the character is to seek out feedback from trusted critics who can be frank and help you grow. And then consistent and reliable. Be consistent by reducing uncertainty, improve your batting average, and reduce undesired variability. Don't be erratic. And then, of course, be reliable for commitments and processes. So the reliability is that when my supervisor calls me, unless I'm in something super important, I always answer the phone because I want to be reliably available to him at all times, as close to 100% as I can. Okay, so here's a shortcut method for building trust. And this works. Let's say you have a person, a boss, or a supervisor, and for some reason they don't trust you. They don't feel like they can. They may be micromanaging you. They don't trust you. So here's a way to fast track trust. The default way is to focus on those domains of trustworthiness. But if that's not working, you have to do something else. So here's what you say. It's really important to me that I earn your trust and confidence. Please tell me exactly what you need from me. Ask for specifics and what success looks like. Write it down, review it with your potential truster, confirm mutual goals and expectations, and then use the model of trust to deliver on your commitments. This absolutely works. Practice it. Extending trust. I have one slide on extending trust. Now, this is where you deciding, should I risk vulnerability with a person, a team, a program, a relationship? Here are some choices. You can just assume good intent as your default, and then just experiment and then adjust. You can assess your propensity to trust, your perception of the risk, and your appraisal of the person's trustworthiness. We have to always be careful because sometimes our appraisal might be wrong. Our perception of risk depends on how you frame things. So think about things from a different perspective, get other points of view, reframe things, and that'll give you a better understanding of those three areas. I just told you about the shortcut method. And of course, the last one, which is model the trust you expect from others. So that covers the content. So I just went over all of these about trust, trustworthiness, trust as a psychological state, the willingness to be vulnerable to the actions of another party, trustworthiness as the attributes of the trustee, to build trust, be trustworthy, to extend trust, you have some tips there. And I use this one as a way of summarizing everything. So remember, the roots are the most important. And I would say of the things in the bottom, in the roots, I would put character as number one. Yeah, and caring, of course, but character as number one. And that's what's missing from a lot of our conversations. And in the appendix, you will find my recommendations, some of the tips from Stephen Covey's book. There's a team of people for people who want to approach the concept of building character from a very rigorous perspective. There's a place in the UK that has a framework for how to teach children in schools to build character. And then a fun way of promoting character. I went to Italy in May and learned about the Romans and the emperors. So this is a really nice book to learn about Stoic philosophy. It's an ancient philosophy that's really based on the Stoic philosophy is based on four things, which is wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline or temperance. It has the component of mindfulness, which is being aware, a view from above, which is taking perspective, and then doing things that align with nature. So it's a fun way to learn about character. If you have children, it's a fun way to introduce to children through characters, because there's a lot of great stories from the Roman times and the philosophers. And back then, philosophy was about something that was achievable by every individual, just like universal values. Every individual can pursue to have more character. And so this is something that was accessible to everybody, not just the emperors. And that's sort of the idea of that kind of philosophy. And it gives you a sort of a fun and interesting and a vivid way to get exposed to character. So it's fun to read. And it's a fun way to expose children to the topic of character, because oftentimes my wife's a teacher, and I asked my wife, she teaches in public schools. I said, do you guys have a curriculum on character? She says, nope, no curriculum on character. So you're kind of just left up to whatever the parents are able to teach their kids, or whatever institution they're involved in. And we know that not all institutions are good. There's variability in the quality of institutions. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions.
Excellent presentation, Dr. Aragon. It's such a refreshing content that you presented. My question to you is, a lot of the things that you talked about really requires culture change within the state service, within the governmental entities that we all serve in. What is your strategy of creating that culture change? Generally, people in the state service are risk averse, and you talked a great deal about trust, trustor, trustee, and creating that environment. How do you go about doing that?
So you're absolutely right. So transforming culture. So culture are these underlying narratives, these mental models, the way things are just done around here. And they just get passed on through organizational culture and traditions. And so we have to transform that. And I think the foundation really starts with actually, I would say that the strategy, I showed you a few key things. One is that you have to have some strategy what direction you want to go in. And that was like the first slide, to become a learning, healing, and impactful organization. I think most organizations would say, yes, we want to get better at what we do. We want to keep our staff, make sure they don't get burned out, and we want to make a difference. So most public agencies do have a mission of service. So it's already part of us. We need to bring out the best and help deal with these other aspects in other ways. So that's one. So I would say that teaching people universal, I'll give you an example. Most organizations, they have a strategic plan, they have a mission, and they have values. If you ask somebody, what are the values of your organizations? I'll bet you nobody can tell you what they are. Because usually people when they focus on values, they focus on values in a very superficial way. I'm calling these universal values. And universal values are the starting set. These should be the starting set of your organizational values. And the idea is that this applies to everybody, even if you're having a disagreement with them, that you should make sure that you're fair, that both of you feel dignity, and that everybody deserves compassion, which is empathy with action. So those values, when people are in their organizations, when they're in that process of strategic planning, developing mission statements, and focusing on values, these are opportunities to really begin to discuss this and to figure out, how does this look like where we work? What does it mean? What are the concrete acts? And I would say this concept of universal values, when you're starting a new project, we would do this in San Francisco. We're starting a new project, and I would say, okay, for this project, we're going to develop some values. Sometimes people say values and principles. We're going to develop some values. We're going to put up on the board here. Here are some universal values that the boss thinks we should do. What other universal values should we add to those? And so you develop some consensus. You do some consensus building, put them up there on the wall, and always come in and check in and say, are we living up to the values that we said that we're going to do for this project? And so you can use this even in a very practical way. Values also become your default criteria for decision making when you don't have easy criteria for how you should decide something. If you have to decide between option A and option B, and option A is more likely to contribute to equity, dignity, compassion, let's go with option A. So they become default criteria. They help you make decisions on the spot and help guide your behavior on the spot. So I would say values is the most important thing for transforming culture. When you get to the, I didn't get to the other one, and then universal values comes in this whole rubric of trust. So I would use the rubric of trust and then pull out universal values when you need to use it, but recognize it's contributing to trust.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Will you be sharing the slides with us? There's been a lot of requests for that, by the way.
I will, right after we're done, I'll send you the slides.
Great. There's a question in the chat that I want to read. This is from Mindy. I said, I really embrace the goals you have for our department. Evidently, she's a CDPH employee. And I love your leadership style. I have two-pronged question with regards to investing in people and leaving no one behind. I would like to ask you to address the CDPH disability parity rate, which is the number of people within, CDPH, person with disabilities, which is down from a year ago from 12.4 to 11.9. The target goal is 16.6. Can you require all managers utilize the LEAP list when hiring new staff as a way to increase the disability parity rate? And then please come back to SDAC again.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a really good, thank you for the question. And this is actually a really good example of a problem that we need to work on. But there's always ways that we can improve. And I will follow up with our CDPH Disability Advisory Committee to figure that out. And so the way that we approach this is, we have a problem. What are the underlying causes? How can we, where do we want to go? And how can we figure out how to get there? And so absolutely, we should definitely figure out how to improve that.
So was there a root cause analysis done regarding this problem, to your knowledge, Dr. Aragon?
Not that I'm aware of. I did see the spreadsheet of the percentages across the different agencies, and the spreadsheet I had us around 12%. But no, we haven't. This has not become a project to focus on.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that this is a measure. So we have a measure here, and then the question is why is it where it is? Is it measurement, or if it's not measurement error, right? Where should it be, and then how do we get there? It's also part of how we're approaching racial equity as well. We don't have enough diversity in terms of race and ethnicity, but I'm not aware that anybody's working on this as a specific project, but that's something that we can work on.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Another question that came: what happens when in the organization is not the model, and how can it be changed?
It starts with us. So all organizations are made up of people, and people by definition have strengths and challenges. So human beings have this ability that other human beings do not, that other animal species do not have. We have the ability to develop consensus around abstract concepts because of language and culture. And so we're able to imagine new worlds and then transform the environment and build those new worlds. Other animal species are not able to do that. So this ability for us through language and culture makes us enabled to come together as teams, and the teams can synergize the diversity of knowledge, skills, and ability to accomplish as a team what they could never accomplish as an individual. So that ability is a human superpower. But the same thing that brings us together also makes us tribal. So that teams start competing against each other, and sometimes that turns into conflict. So organizations, by definition, because we're made up of teams, is going to have variability, is going to have conflict, and sometimes these things, depending on the direction of culture, can become dysfunctional. So when that happens, it's not that anybody's bad, it's just that we're human beings, and that we have to really understand the organizational dynamics, the psychology, and sort of say, let's step back, let's figure out how we can fix this and work together. We know so much more now about social psychology, cognitive neuroscience. There's so much more we know now. We have a lot more tools available to us that we can go and think about how can we transform an organization from an organization that may be risk averse, that doesn't have a lot of trust, that may have a lot of dysfunction, to one that is a learning organization with a culture of trust. And like any relationship, and you all know this, you have to continue to invest in the relationship, because it doesn't mean that just because you reach a great state for a short period of time, it's going to continue. You have to try to build in the systems and hopefully the culture so that it gets better over time. It doesn't take it. So people tell me it takes about 5 years to make progress. This is not something that happens slowly.
Great. Thank you so much. One other question. Do you have any events or methods to utilize for springboarding the culture change? Again, this is from the chat.
Well, yeah. So we have an organizational change manager. And so there is a communications plan. So, we have town halls. I bring it up in meetings. I'm sharing it with all of you. So, this is sort of part of the strategy is to get, actually, this is the first time that I've shared this slide set on trust. So you are the first audience to see this. So when you get it, feel free to give me feedback. Anything I could have done better or differently, please let me know. And so this is part of the idea, is like planting seeds. The more seeds I can plant across agencies in California, and all of you can be the seeds of change. The seeds of change can come from anywhere. That's why I'm sharing this with you, because I think having these frameworks can be very powerful, because they have face validity. When people look at them, people say, yeah, of course, we want to be that. Most people most people agree, yeah, these are good, but they don't know how to bring it all together. So hopefully this will become a playbook that wherever you're located, you can be the seed for change.
Great. Excellent note. Another question really doesn't pertain to you, but it talks about enforcement. And I think that this particular writer is talking about the disability parity rate. Is this, but again, this probably should go to CalHR, and Eli, I'll ask Eli, who's a representative of CalHR later on. Anything else you wish to add before I let you go, Dr. Aragon?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you. Thank you for everything that you do. And let's hopefully this will be the start of something long-term. And like, remember, so wherever you're at, you are the seeds of change. You are all leaders. That's the other thing important to remember. Leadership is not about being in a position. Leadership is just about having influence through inspiration. So think of that. So there's a lot that you can all do. And so I'm happy to partner with all of you so we can move towards a culture of healing and health for everybody in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aragon. Everyone appreciated your presentation, got a lot of accolades and thank yous for you. And please come back and visit us anytime. And really, we appreciated this wonderful presentation. We look forward to receiving your slides so I can share that with the audience.
You're welcome.
Good day, Doctor. And you're welcome to stay on.
Okay. Thank you. I have to run, but thank you so much.
All right.
Bye, everyone.